how do you even know when you have a hormone imbalance?
Your hormones may be struggling if you are somebody who feels at the mercy of your period, your PMS. So you're having mood swings, insomnia, hot flashes, night sweats. These point to issues of estrogen and progesterone. Other signs of a hormone imbalance may be that you're having irregular cycle, oily skin, acne, losing hair on your head. That can point towards a testosterone imbalance, as we commonly see in polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS. And then there can be other things more related to you're having fatigue. Your skin looks dull and dry. Maybe you're having digestive issues like gas, bloating, constipation. Your joints are feeling achy, and that could point towards hypothyroidism. Hormone issues can show up because they're interacting with every single system in your body. They're out there communicating what is going on, and they influence how each system functions. So that can be anywhere from mood to how your joints are able to move, to how motivated you are to exercise and how well you recover from exercise.
So this is really a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Dr. Brighten. The book is behind you. I don't have my hard copy, but I did read the audio. I read the audio and the PDF, and it has so much information that is very timely and actionable that people can actually use today to help themselves. So let's go right into it. Besides saying thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm so glad that we could connect. I know it's been a bit of a struggle with my schedule to make this happen.
But you know what? It's better late than never, they say, right?
Absolutely.
And so your book actually called Is This Normal? How long has it been out now? Like 2 years? Like a while, right? 3 years?
2023. No, it just came out.
It's 2023?
Yes, and the paperback is just on its way out in just a couple of months.
Wow, so I must have read it before it was even, like maybe just before it launched, like when I got the PDF, probably from your publisher.
Yeah, they probably sent you the galley,
yeah.
So you had the uncorrected proof.
Uncorrected proof. Well, nevertheless, I thought it was fantastic. Why don't we start with the most obvious question, right? Like, give us an origin of who you are, what you do, and then I have like a plethora of questions I want to talk to you about.
Sure. So I'm board certified in naturopathic endocrinology, certified in sex counseling, and my background is in nutrition science. So I started out way back more than 20 years ago, really as food as medicine foundation. And I have been working in women's health for well over a decade, listening to people in my office and online, asking the same questions over and over. Is this normal?
Yeah. I mean, in my 40s, I feel like things I never even thought I would even think about. Like I never thought about it, never even knew it existed in my 20s and 30s. Now I'm asking, is this normal? So I feel like every woman at some time of their life will need to pick up this book. So my first question is, how do you even know when you have a hormone imbalance? When do you know? Like, that is to me the first thing.
Absolutely. So hormone imbalance is like a big bucket, right? It's a catch-all term. And lots of people use this hormone imbalance. And as medical providers, it's on us to sort it out of what does that actually mean. So your hormones may be struggling if you are somebody who feels at the mercy of your period, at the mercy of your PMS. So you're having mood swings, insomnia, maybe you're having hot flashes, night sweats. These point to issues of estrogen and progesterone. Other signs of a hormone imbalance may be that you're having irregular cycles, oily skin, acne, losing hair on your head. That can point towards a testosterone imbalance, as we commonly see in polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS. And then there can be other things that they're not so cyclical. They're more related to you're having fatigue. Your skin looks dull and dry. Maybe you're having digestive issues like gas, bloating, constipation. Your joints are feeling achy, and that could point towards hypothyroidism. So what I just took you through is a whole lot of ways that hormone issues can show up. And that's because they're interacting with every single system in your body. Your cells have receptors for these hormones. These hormones are chemical messengers. They're out there communicating what is going on, and they influence how each system functions. So that can be anywhere from mood to how your joints are able to move, to how motivated you are to exercise and how well you recover from exercise. So there's not any part of your life that isn't touched by your hormones.
Right. I understand that. I'm curious because someone like myself, right, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this podcast, who are into fitness, working out, doing all the things, they think they're eating properly. They are doing strength training workouts as many, like 3 or 4 times a week, like prescribed, and they're not able to keep the muscle that they had, or they are getting there. It takes much longer, much harder to even maintain it, and they are fatigued. Like, is it something that, how do we kind of like balance that out? Like, how do we stop the hormones from, or is it possible if we're doing all those things in our 40s, how do we kind of maintain what we have without losing muscle mass and having our moods tweak and change? Like, is there a way to kind of stop this from this aging process? I mean,
yeah. So this is a big question because we're talking about maintaining muscle mass and what's going on with body composition, and then there's mood, and these things can absolutely be related. So when it comes to maintaining muscle mass, this is the thing that's like, when I was studying for my master's in nutrition, I was studying sarcopenic obesity, and that is basically muscle deletion as we age. And what I knew 20 years ago from the research that still holds strong: branched chain amino acids, getting yourself complete proteins in your diet. Now, what changes as we enter into our 40s is that, what I call metabolic obscenities. Like, how we did in our 20s, where the way we ate and the way we lived was like literally like cussing at your body sometimes.
Yeah,
it was very derogatory. You can't get away with that as much. And people can let us know in the comments if they have noticed that as they enter their 40s, they have 1 or 2 cocktails and they're like, I'm dragging it. It's definitely affecting me. Things are shifting and changing that we then have to adapt to. It doesn't mean that we're getting weaker or something is wrong with us. It is time to adapt to this phase of life. So we need to increase our protein. We need to make sure that we are fueling appropriately. We're of the age where the eat less, move more mantra, be fat free, was still influencing a lot of our lives. That doesn't fly in our 40s and beyond. So fueling with appropriate muscle mass and nutrient density. You have to strength train regularly. Muscle is expensive to maintain. It's very expensive. So you got to put inputs in that tell the body, let's maintain it. So we need the fuel. We also need the movement. So strength training, and if you are if you are like, I am strength training, adding additional things like a weighted vest and a treadmill desk into your routine is a way to help stimulate even more the bone mass that we need and the bone density going into later in life, and also maintain that muscle mass. Now, in addition, like when it comes to hormones, I always have the question of, is testosterone starting to decline, and what is going on with insulin? So when it comes to testosterone, roughly about 50% of your testosterone production is coming from your adrenal glands. They never quit. Never will they quit. Your ovaries, they will retire. They will be like, make me a cake, I'm out. I am done. And so even once you go through menopause, and some women, this may resonate with them, as they're making that perimenopausal transition or they enter into menopause, they may notice that they're losing more hair on their head because estrogen and progesterone are no longer there, and testosterone just gets to shine and do its thing. So the idea that just because we're aging, we're absolutely going to be out of testosterone, not necessarily true, but you may have to bring in testosterone replacement therapy, or maybe by way of DHEA, which is the adrenal hormone that gets converted into testosterone. So we've got you got to eat, you got to move, and you got to check your hormones. The last thing I'll say is inflammation and insulin. We have to be paying attention to those. Estrogen is super protective for our metabolic health. As that declines, we can find ourselves edging towards that diabetes, which is insulin resistance. And that is going to affect your body composition, also cognition, how well your brain works. And if we find ourselves in this inflammatory state, that is going to be very, very problematic in terms of our mood and our brain health. I could also talk more about the microbiome, but I'm going to pause and let you kind of chew on that.
Yeah, no. I'm writing notes. You probably are watching me writing notes because you're touching upon all of these things that I wanted to talk to you about, and you're just kind of getting them all in that one great soundbite. But let's start with this. Let's go with testosterone first, okay? Because there's a lot of different controversy around it. So interestingly enough, a lot of my friends, people I work with, we all work out, and yet we all have been we do all for the people who do all the things. We get blood tests regularly, we get all the biomarkers checked, and a majority of us are like showing very low testosterone, like very low. And these are people who are like myself. I'm almost like zero. And yet I do weight training all the time. What is the reason for that? And is the answer, what a lot of my friends are doing is they're getting these testosterone pellets, they're getting testosterone creams. Is that a safe option? That's the first question. I'll let you answer that, and then I'm going to go into my next thing.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so here's the thing. As I said, the adrenal glands are going to make testosterone. A lot of us we're part of the hustle culture fallout, so to speak. So if you are burning the candle at both ends, and I want to say this very specifically to the women who are in their 40s and 50s, you are in a very unique generation where you happen to be caretaking, in a lot of instances, parents and children. That is super stressful, and society barely set us up to be successful as mothers, let alone successful to navigate this. There was actually some research that came out saying that the Gen X and elder millennials, we expect that there's a phase where we go into depression and then come out. We can talk more about the hormones around this and how we can prevent this. However, it has been hypothesized that Gen X and elder millennials will be the first generation of women not to come out of that depression because they're so absolutely depleted. So number one is we have to be taking care of our adrenal glands. And that looks like things like getting adequate sleep, not overtraining and undereating, which just sometimes feels like the solution as the belly fat that can come up at that phase of life. Sometimes that feels like the solution because it would have worked in your 20s, but it won't necessarily work for you in that way. Tending to inflammation, that can look like things like looking for hidden infections as well. So we definitely have to be taking care of our adrenal glands. And when you mentioned testing, I have seen people come back with low testosterone, total testosterone. What we actually want to test in women is free testosterone along with a sex hormone binding globulin. And why that's important is because that protein, sex hormone binding globulin, if it is elevated, it is holding on to your testosterone. So maybe you don't have a testosterone production issue, but actually that sex hormone binding globulin, which is coming primarily, it's going to be coming from the liver. That's the problem. And we want to actually do lifestyle shifts, take care of the liver and things to balance out that protein. So we make that testosterone bioavailable. Free testosterone. So the total is just all that's out there. Free testosterone is what your cells can actually utilize. So to your point about using testosterone therapy, I am not a fan of pellets so much. I think they're cost prohibitive. And once they're in, we can't modulate it so easily. It's in and that's it. That being said, there are people who are like, I tried it all. The pellets worked best for me. As long as they're not going extremely high with their testosterone, we can be okay. But that's a bit of the problem is a lot of times that testosterone pellet is far too much testosterone. And so estrogen and testosterone, progesterone, they also modulate the immune system. So we want testosterone on board because it can help us have a healthy immune response. But when we start to push these hormones in different directions, that can be problematic. And as the case with too high of testosterone, that if that's converting into dihydrotestosterone that I talk about in the book, DHT, that can lead to irreversible hair loss. Your follicle becomes small, it's miniaturized, and at that point the hair shaft is so thin until it doesn't grow anymore, and we are never getting that hair back. And that's why I'm always like, testosterone is good, but that doesn't mean because it's good that more is better.
That's, first of all, that's so scary. I mean, I'm nervous about those things because, like, you, to your point, you don't know, like, if it's too much or whatever, then it's stuck in your body and you can't do anything about it. But it's something that a lot of people that I know around in Los Angeles, everyone's just putting a pellet in. Now, can you also gain weight from testosterone? If you're like, some women, depending on their body type, maybe, I feel like they get super lean, but then I've seen other friends of mine and they're getting like, they're looking heavier, more mass is on them.
Yes. So some people will gain more weight with testosterone. You can see more belly fat coming from that. It can actually work against you. And in the case of polycystic ovarian syndrome, we do see the interplay of testosterone and insulin leading to that midsection weight gain. So when we see midsection weight gain in a woman, we have to look to those metabolic issues. That's typically how we see men gaining weight. But in the cases of PCOS, that's something that we'll see will be a lot more common. And so, as I mentioned before about talking about the microbiome and belly fat, this is something where the other thing, besides hormones we have to talk about is eating enough fiber and getting at least 25 grams of fiber in every day. In that late phase perimenopause, and then once you cross that menopause threshold, your estrogen goes down. And what we know is that as estrogen goes down, so does the diversity of the microbiome. If you want to live long and healthy and stay lean with your efforts, then we have to take care of the microbiome as well. And that's where making sure that you've got those fibers coming in. If you are someone right now who's like, I eat like 5 grams of fiber a day, great. Add another 5 after a week. Add another 5 and work your way up slowly until you hit 25. If you usually eat 5 and tomorrow you eat 25, you're going to be so mad at me because you're not going to feel good. So go slow. And that can look like things like adding psyllium husk, eating chia seeds, making sure that you're eating fermented foods because those will also help with probiotics and the postbiotic creation, which is going to help you overall. And this is something that not a lot of people talk about, metabolic health and the microbiome, but it is absolutely crucial.
Do you believe that we need animal protein to keep and maintain our muscle mass then as we age?
Okay, I love this question because when I was doing my research, I was a vegetarian. And I was like, this is cognitive dissonance because I'm studying this. I see the outcomes. I see how frail. And I want people to understand, like, this isn't just about how you look. Muscle is a very important endocrine organ. That means hormone organ. It is a tissue of longevity. So it's not just how you look. It is your risk of fractures and falls. And we know that the more muscle you have in the thighs, the more mitochondria you have, the healthier your brain is. And women are very high risk for dementia. So with all that being said, I was a vegetarian, and my goodness, the hustle to get leucine, isoleucine, and valine in. Those are the branched chain amino acids. And I was taking supplements and eating mass amount of eggs and just and dairy and trying to do all of this stuff. And it became very apparent to me that this was going to be different. Like it was consuming me. I was having to, and here I am in my 20s, right? You get a lot more wiggle room. And so if someone is vegan or vegetarian, I think what the mistake the vegan and vegetarian community makes is acting like protein just happens, that like you'll just get protein, and it doesn't. And I have had patients who are vegetarian by statement, and when we look at their diet, they're actually a carbitarian. So what they're eating is just mostly carbs and not actually getting protein. And knowing that not all protein is created equal. That's the other thing that I see a lot of them get wrong, where they're like, well, if you combine rice and beans, then you're going to, and I'm like, that's a lot of carbs though. And that's a lot to consume. So you're going to probably have to lean on supplements as you get older. We all benefit from taking creatine, not only for muscles, but for our brain health as well. It's very well researched. But I do think Well, I don't only think it, but we know it from the research that animal protein is superior in terms of what it delivers for amino acids. And for people maybe listening to this and they're like, I'm vegetarian, I don't want to eat a cow, maybe you can make the step towards fish, which, that is in the same vein as the Mediterranean diet, which we also know wins in the research. So that was a long way of answering that, but I just want people to know that I was once a vegetarian too. And then I read and studied and was like, wait a minute, this is not necessarily going to set me up for the healthiest 80-year-old version of me.
No, I listen, I'm a big believer in what you just said. So I feel like I think all of it has become very political, and we've lost track of the actual science that, points to the importance of animal protein. Especially for vegans. I think that it's someone like yourself who's very knowledgeable and knows, what's what, and what leucine, for example, even is. The average Joe doesn't. And I think it becomes really difficult. Like, I've seen it. Like, if you need to be on point, if you're going to be a vegan and you're going to try to get all your macros and whatever it is, it's like a project. Like, it is a full-time job.
It is.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
And if you're a busy on the go person, it's so much, it's lifestyle wise, I find it just so much easier to integrate animal protein or eggs. Like, vegan people won't even eat eggs, obviously, or dairy. So you're really kind of, kind of screwing yourself a little bit. But even the fact of, you kind of touched upon this, like whey protein, like protein powder, all of these things that are protein, obviously products, the bioavailability from an egg versus a protein powder is very significant. You get way more ability for that protein bioavailability from an egg. So like you were saying, not every protein is equal either.
No, absolutely. And the egg is like the perfect protein, right? An entire organism grows from it. And to your point, I see when I was studying nutrition, when I was first getting my degree, they made it very clear to us that there are 3 areas where people have irrational emotional attachments and will attack you if you challenge the belief. Okay, so I'm studying science and they're like, it doesn't matter. And that is religion, politics, and food. Food, we have science to support that. Religion and politics, those are ideologies, those are beliefs, that's acceptable. But with food, there are a lot of beliefs. And I know, as somebody who was a vegetarian for a decade, it becomes, in some ways it's like your identity. And I remember this vegan patient of mine where, after we did blood work and we were looking at everything and they were like, oh, I have to supplement with this, I have to supplement with that. And like looking at everything, and they were like, how is this better for the planet? Because that was their motivation when I'm doing all of these things. I also had the benefit of getting my degree at a school that was a heavy agricultural school. So when I was studying nutrition, we were also learning about the farmer. We were learning about the food industry as a whole. And I don't think people understand how impactful and harmful monoculture crops are, and how so to the environment, and how they're really decimating the planet, and how a farmer who has grass-fed cows are really benefiting the planet and the microbiome of the earth, and how much that is really set up for positive impacts on climate change. But there is so much propaganda every time. I don't even watch Netflix documentaries when they come out anymore. Well, I think it was like Forks Over Knives. That was like the last one I saw. And now they all come out. They all pretty much say the same thing. And they're highly, highly biased. And that's what I find a lot in these conversations. On the flip side, we have the carnivore diet. And that is like no research really to support that either. It's an extreme elimination diet. Will you feel good in the short term? Probably, if you're somebody who's struggling with, various symptoms. But in the long term, we have to ask, is that extreme of elimination really the right step forward. The unsexy thing that most people just don't want to hear is that the truth about what is best for your nutrition is somewhere in the middle, and it is nothing that any news source is going to make a flashy headline about, or that any algorithm on social media will ever reward you for talking about. And that, I think, is what confuses people so much, is that the algorithm rewards controversy. It rewards people who are going against the grain and who are saying outlandish things. And that's what's landing in your FYP or on your feed all the time, to the point where you're just like, I don't know what to think. And to that I say, always sit back and ask, is this true for me? Is this right for me? A lot of people are saying true information in some capacity. My book has a lot of true information, but not everything in there will be absolutely true for you. I say that, and although the book has a lot of ranges of like, this is normal, this is what's normal. But when it comes to the nutrition piece, that's what I invite people to do. Test things out, see if it's true for you. There are things that we know absolutely. Don't exceed 25 grams of refined sugars or added sugars in your diet. Get your 25 grams of fiber. But even as they say that 25 grams, some people may find that if they have like rheumatoid arthritis, for example, that's an autoimmune disease, it's questionable that like 25 grams or more, is that really helpful? So you do have to ask what's true for your body, and you live in it, which means you have unique expertise that nobody outside of your body can have.
I love that. God, I like you. You got a. I like how you explain things, and I'm in such agreement with how you speak and like your overall, like I guess your approach. Because the truth is, like social media will always favor the people who are the most controversial because it does well for them. People want the magic pill, or they want those people who are polarizing. If you speak facts, like, oh, actually, it's in the middle. It's kind of like, it's not this or that. It's like a combination. You're not interesting. Bye. We won't reward that. But a couple of things I wanted to talk about, keep on going with, because I keep on making these notes. Women, creatine. I get a lot of questions about creatine because women are afraid that creatine will, again, create weight gain, because it water retention, bloating, because it's always been very known back when as like a very manly supplement. Can we just talk about that?
Yeah, totally. It's and because it's always been known as a manly supplement, it got more attention in the research, because anything that's associated with testes gets more attention in the research. So, the reality is that this can not only using it as a supplement. About 5 grams is what seems to be best. If you do find you have any digestive discomfort, I ask you to read the labels and make sure that you're getting a good, clean version. Ideally, things that are third-party tested, because they're verifying that what they say is in there is actually in there. That's something that with my supplement line I'm very picky about, is that I'm like, I'm going to put this in my mouth. I want to know what I say is in there is actually in there and nothing else. So it's the unfortunate thing that sometimes you pick up supplements like at a big box store and they don't actually have what they say they do in there. Fish oil was a good one where Consumer Reports found that it was actually just a bunch of inflammatory oils, or there were also herbal supplements.
Can you say that again? Because the Wi-Fi just went out.
Weird. Okay. So fish oil was a big one that when Consumer Reports looked at it, they found that it wasn't actually omega-3s primarily in there, but there were a lot of inflammatory oils. And there's also been, Consumer Reports showing that like herbal supplements are like household plants when they actually test them. Like nobody wants to be taking that. So firstly, it might not actually be creatine. It might be the supplement that you're taking or other stuff that's added into it that might cause digestive issues. And if it's not, you're like, no, this is good stuff. You may have to do it in divided doses, where you're doing 2.5 grams and then 2.5 grams later. Beware of the gummies. I'm somebody that I'm just like, I don't want to have to drink a smoothie every day. And I've been looking into gummies, and some of them have like 6 to 10 grams of sugar in a serving. And I'm like, I just told y'all, don't go above 25 grams of added sugar. And I'm right there. I'm like, beware of that. So there's a lot of tricky ways sugar comes in. Now, the other thing is that beyond just your muscle health, so it can be it'll help with energy, it'll help with performance, it can help your muscle health overall, but it also can help your brain health. And that, I think, when we stand back and we consider that roughly 66% of the dementia population is women, we're at a really high risk for this. Doing whatever you can to preserve your brain is really important. Now, in terms of water retention, so firstly, if you were blessed with ovaries, you are not blessed with a biological framework to get bulky. And, I'll hear women say, like, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to get bulky like a man. And I'm like, good luck with that. If you can figure out how to do that, let me know. Because most people are struggling, as you were saying, in their 40s just to maintain lean body mass. Now, with that, if you're noticing water retention, it is a question of like, is something going on with your progesterone? Like, is something else going on? But having a little bit more hydration you hold on to isn't always a bad thing. So, when we get dehydrated, we can feel more fatigued. When we're adequately hydrated, we have less fine lines and wrinkles. Like, we can feel a lot better. But if you're noticing that, like, no, I have water retention, it's a good idea to talk to a provider. That you're like, why is this happening for your body? Because there might be something else going on, because that shouldn't be something normal to expect.
So I'm not a shake person, because I think shakes are just a massive amount of calories and sugar, and people under-index and underestimate what they're really. I don't believe in drinking my food. I believe in like chewing and eating personally. Mm-hmm. How do people take creatine, or how do people take the collagen and all these things that people say are necessary as we get older for our hormones?
You can always make a beverage with them and just mix it in there. So you can just mix the supplement in there. Oh. As you talk about shakes, this is where, one, definitely chewing your smoothie. If you're going to be a smoothie person, it shouldn't be so liquid that you just suck it right down. There should be like a little bit of chewing to it, because that is going to liberate digestive enzymes and get the enzymes in your mouth that break down carbs going. I'm going to tell you guys like what I put into a smoothie. And just stay with me, okay? So I'm just get out of the way. Cod liver oil. Yeah. And people are always like, gross. Doesn't it taste like cod liver?
I heard it's amazing.
Doesn't. Yeah, so I add cod liver oil. It's a great source of vitamin A, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids. So cod liver oil goes in there. Psyllium husk and other fibers. So I'm going to be adding psyllium husk in there. Sometimes it's, I'm getting like chia seeds, cacao nibs. I'm looking at different fibers that I can put in there to try to get at least 5 to 10 grams of fiber into that shake. Or smoothie. That's going to slow things down. So it's not just running through my system. It's going to feed my microbiome, but it also will make it so that any absorption of sugar is slowed. It's not just a rapid absorption. I am putting fresh vegetables in there. I will put like a handful of spinach or some kinds of other greens. I also encourage people who are maybe struggling with their libido or ability to orgasm to freeze watermelon rinds. So you want to wash the outside of the watermelon because it can have mold on it. And then you can chop it up, you can grate it. I'm super lazy, so I just chop it up and put it in the freezer, and I will add it to my smoothies. It's rich in citrulline, which can help with clitoral engorgement, but also just getting blood flow everywhere. It's also a trick for people that are difficult blood draw. You have a harder time getting your blood draw. That can be a trick to add in as well, because it's going to help with your blood flow. So that's going to be another source of fiber as well. So interesting ways to put fiber in there. We've got our healthy fat, which is going to be the omega-3 fatty acids from the cod liver oil, and then protein. And that, I like to see people putting 20 grams or more of protein in there. And again, if it is so liquid that you just suck it down, it's going to be harder for you to absorb and get all of those things in. And if you drink a smoothie and you're hungry, like within 45 minutes to an hour, that didn't have enough fat, fiber, and protein in it. So it's an opportunity to deliver fat, fiber, and protein, not an opportunity to just eat a bunch of fruit. And my son actually said to me, and I will usually put like dark tart cherries in there Those are great for your like melatonin production. They are a great source of vitamin C that supports progesterone, adrenal health. And my son said to me, like, why can't we just drink normal smoothies like other people do with fruit in them? And I was like, do you want to know what normal people's metabolic profiles look like? Like, why don't we just get diabetes and have heart disease? Like, that's what you're asking your mom right now. Like, we are not doing that. And I also, I like to throw in probiotic powders in there as well. So like I have my own probiotics that I just open up the capsules and dump in there. Sometimes I'm opening up capsules of magnesium and putting them in there because I'm like, why not? If I'm going to deliver this, I'm just going to get it. So there is a way to make things nutrient dense, but to your point, if it's completely liquid, like a green juice, you're going to spike your blood sugar. It's going to cause metabolic chaos in you, at least for that period of time. And it's not going to be satiating. So if it's thick enough that you kind of need to chew it, you need a big, like a boba straw to drink it through and you're chewing it, that's the better way to go.
Oh my God, I love that. Okay, first of all, that watermelon rind, I had never heard that before for your sexual libido.
Yes.
Okay, can you talk about that and give me some more very unusual things that people can eat to help them with their hormones, their libido, that aren't so basic and common.
Yeah. Okay. So the citrulline that's in the watermelon, that can help with the tissue engorgement. So penis, clitoris, same tissue, responds the same way. The only thing unique really about it is that the clitoris doesn't have to pass urine or ejaculate, and it's tucked up inside. So it gets to be a lot more sensitive and only serve the purpose of pleasure. Something else that people usually don't talk about is saffron. So I love saffron because not only is saffron been shown that like people who are on SSRIs, they can experience anorgasmia, inability to orgasm, or low libido. They're not even in the mood for sex. And saffron's been shown to overcome SSRIs. And in the average person, it can also help as well in those areas. And the other reason why I really love it is because when we were talking about perimenopause, in that phase of life, so that late perimenopause, moving into menopause, it can be as high as 38% the rate of women diagnosed with depression who are going to be at risk for that. And saffron has been shown in some research to beat out SSRIs in terms of helping your mood. So it's good for your sex life and it's good for your mood. And who doesn't love like eating like Indian food or Persian food? The research has been done in supplements, and you can certainly supplement, but you can also just add these things in your food. It's a lot like turmeric. Yes, we have turmeric supplements, but there's also benefit to just grating fresh turmeric into food and actually eating the fibers as well and having that. So saffron and citrulline from watermelon rinds, those are the two that I think a lot of people don't think of as aphrodisiacs. When it comes to, when I say that word, most people are like oysters.
Oysters.
I know. And that's one where it's like, well, maybe it's the act of eating oysters. You're usually like in a higher end place. Like there's a different ambiance to eating them. You have to be very mindful and paying attention. If anyone's ever eaten an oyster, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, there's a way to slurp it. You gotta do everything just right for this to be enjoyable. But they are rich in zinc, and zinc can help testosterone levels, which is one of the hormones. So testosterone and really estrogen are two of the key hormones driving sexual desire, arousal, your ability to self-lubricate. By the way, I go through a list of aphrodisiacs in my book, and I talk about different foods that you can eat for all of that. But oysters, it may be the zinc, it may be the ambiance. It may be just slurping on some shellfish.
I love that. Okay, so can we talk? What does progesterone do? What is that responsible for?
So progesterone, I love this hormone so much. I'm so sad that it ever goes away. So the only way to progesterone, the sufficient amounts in your body that are going to affect your mood and your metabolism, that is going to be by way of ovulation. So we ovulate. What's left behind is the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is a temporary endocrine structure in the ovary that makes progesterone. And when it is optimal, we are going to feel a lot more calm, less anxious. We're going to sleep better. And it's going to be helping with the endometrium get ready for a baby. If you're in your 40s, though, you might not be wanting a baby. So you might be like, well, whatever. What else is it doing for me? So it does have that crucial role. It's also involved in our bone health, our brain health. And something that's interesting that I talk about in the book is that we can see a 5 to 10% increased caloric need during our luteal phase, that is ovulation, until your next period, because of progesterone. So progesterone rises, it makes us a little less sensitive to insulin, but it also raises our metabolic rate. We can feel a lot hungrier. That is normal to feel hungrier during that time. But for some people too, because it raises their body temperature, and it's very slight, but some people are sensitive, they find that they're training, they feel like they get fatigued faster, or it's a little harder to go hard in the gym during that phase just because they're feeling a little bit warmer. And that's where I'm like, listen, if you're going to the cycle class, be the person to get there early and get in front of the fan. Like make sure you have moisture wicking clothes, which seems like simple and obvious, but I do have patients that are like, oh, I've been going in like my sweatpants and a hoodie. And I'm like, that's not during your luteal phase, friend.
That's so interesting. I find like my appetite, I feel whenever I have my period, my menstruating, I feel I'm starving, like ravenously hungry. And that's normal. And then I just kind of dissipate as I guess it goes, like through the week or so, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely normal. And it's where I'll see people telling women like, you just have to have more willpower and like, don't eat as much. And that you're asking them to overcome their biology and their hormones. And instead of saying, don't eat so much, instead we want to focus on where are those extra calories coming from? Nutrient dense foods. This is a good time to add the sweet potatoes into the diet. So why sweet potatoes? Great carbs, but also full of nutrients. Or maybe cold potatoes. And so you bake a potato and then you have it cold, maybe in a salad. Why? Because that will actually, the way the starch changes won't spike your blood sugar in the same way. And it'll actually be very beneficial for your microbiome.
Is that called resistant starch? Like
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So can we just talk about resistant starch? So changing how, like, even if it's the same food, it can make a difference. Can you just touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's the things that are cooked. So like we can do it with bread as well, but when the potato, so we've got the potato, we freshly just baked it or steamed it or whatever you did with it. And if you eat it right then and they're warm, because of the type of starch that it is, you will break it down easier and you can see a spike in your glucose and a spike in your blood sugar should follow. By the way, that's a normal physiological response that if glucose comes up, insulin should come up. So I know a lot of people are chasing insulin and being like, we don't want our insulin to come up. Friends, if your glucose comes up, insulin has to follow. So we have to go downstream and never spike that glucose in an extreme way. Now, is a potato your biggest problem? No, the biggest problems are like just a bowl full of like ice cream or eating a candy bar. Like that's a bigger problem than a potato. But for people that really are trying to dial in, or maybe they have concerns about their metabolic health, or they're just like, I really want to help my microbiome thrive, putting that potato in the fridge, letting it cool down, those starches will actually change. Now we're not going to get that huge swing in our blood sugar and our insulin, and we're going to feel more satiated, so full. And we're going to have, as we have that even blood sugar, right? So blood sugar goes up a little bit as you eat and it comes back down. That makes it a lot easier for the rest of our hormones, because when we have spikes and drops and spikes, and so we got the peaks and troughs, that's where we then have to start mounting a physiological response to that with our hormones. So releasing hormones that tell our liver, give up your glycogen, give up your sugar, your storage form of sugar, and put that out there. And then here comes another blood sugar wave. And so that is one way, like one trick. If you like, a friend of mine who's a gut health expert, he was saying like, don't eat the French fries. And I was like, hear me out. Homemade French fries that you put in the fridge and then like eat the next day.
That
so
works.
If you do, Yeah, so if you do like potatoes, or if you are training really hard, I think this is also a pitfall, is that, first it was like vilify fat, then it was vilify carbs. It's like, it's just always something that has to be like the devil of food. If you are training really hard and you're just like, I am plateauing, look at your carbohydrate intake. If you are not getting adequate carbohydrates in, that can definitely be difficult in your training, but it also can negatively affect your hormones.
I was going to ask you that because what I do, which I think is a terrible thing, but it's now like, it's a habit. And I've been trained to think carbs are bad, right, my whole life,
Yeah.
right? Like my whole life, like, you know what I mean? Like the last God knows how many years.
I'm so sorry. My dog.
What? Oh, no,
Your dog just barked.
Oh, no, I didn't
So
even hear.
sorry. Okay.
You're good.
Oh, so sorry.
No, I was going to say that I'm using fruit as my carbs, but is that too much sugar? Because I'm like I think a lot of people do this because you don't want to have you don't want to have like a chocolate bar, or you want to like, you want your sugar craving, you want to kind of temper that sugar craving. I'm having like 6 pounds of grapes instead of having a chocolate bar or ice cream or whatever it is I really want. And in my brain, even though I know it's a carbohydrate, it's, I'm like, well, it's fruit, it's healthy, it's natural. And I'll have, like I said, like pounds of cherries, pounds of grapes. And then I'm gaining weight. And I'm like, why am I gaining weight? So.
Yeah, okay, so fruit is not bad, but at the same time, let me not but that. Fruit is not bad, and we can overconsume it. So with that, you really have to ask the question, would a couple of squares of dark chocolate have satisfied you over 6 pounds of grapes, right? So fruit is not bad, and we can definitely overeat. If we're passing like 2 servings of fruit or more, that might be too much for our body. And there are benefits to eating things like dark chocolate. They have polyphenols in them. So the dark chocolate also has magnesium. So there are benefits to eating those things. When we're talking about ice cream, it's like, okay, yeah, we all know that ice cream is like not the best thing for our blood sugar, but we can certainly have a very sensible meal prior to that has the fiber, fat, protein, like I talked about, and then have a serving of ice cream. I don't think we should be so restrictive. I think there's two camps out there that have become very problematic. We've got diet culture, and we've got the extremes of anti-diet culture. And I think both have become very problematic and toxic.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I identify with being part of anti-diet culture, if you're not out there being like, eat whatever you want, and anyone who talks like about sugar, they're just part of diet culture. Like, if you're not that person, this is not you, okay? It's not you. But there are people who are like, hey, you should just be able to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. And I've had people come at me when I talk about sugar, and they're like, sugar is the gateway to diet culture, and the only reason you're talking about that is because you just want people to be a certain size. And I'm like, that was a huge leap, okay? That wasn't about me. And I'm talking about the science. And just because we have body image issues, we have inappropriate expectations of what women's bodies look like. It's like society, because we have all these problems in our society, doesn't mean we just go ignore the research on this. Because to me, the number on the scale is the least interesting thing about your health. What is more interesting to me is, what is your blood pressure? What is your hemoglobin A1C, the marker of your blood sugar for the last 3 months? What's your fasting insulin look like? What are the markers that we know can lead to cardiovascular issues or longevity? These are the things that are most interesting. And I will tell you, you will not achieve optimizing those if you're just eating anything you want, whenever you want, or if you're completely restricting all of the time. Either one of those extremes, we are not going to achieve the goal, which I hope is everybody's goal, to not just live long, but to live very healthy and to feel good in your body on the entire journey.
I agree with you. Also, testing. We touched upon it. You talked about it again. It's become a very big trend now, like a very big hashtag, all these testing, the genetic testing, getting tested for this,
Yeah.
like, which ones are the most accurate to test?
So there's a lot of testing out there, right? And I think that if you have unlimited funds and you absolutely want to hack your longevity, then go for it and get the full panels. Like I got a full body MRI. Right now in the medical community, people are like, that's frivolous. Like people shouldn't be doing that. I'm like, I want the data. I actually found out I have endometriosis and adenomyosis, two chronic conditions, because I did this screening exam. And so, this is all to say, it depends. For the average individual, that's going to be too much. So what should we be looking at? Let's say, like, if we have insurance, our doctor's willing to run it, what are we most likely to get covered? So hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is what your blood sugar has looked like on average for the last 3 months. It's going to tell me more than a fasting glucose. But the fasting glucose comes with a comp metabolic panel. That's going to tell me about kidney liver function. That is really important. We want to know that at least annually. When I do a hemoglobin A1C, I want to see a fasting insulin. I will see problems with your fasting insulin before I ever see problems with your actual blood sugar measurements. So I want to head that off at the pass. That is really important to be having done. Vitamin D, we need to be screening that. We know that people live further from the equator, they get less sun exposure, their vitamin D is lower, they have higher risks of certain cancers. That's just cancer. There's all these other things that vitamin D is linked to as well. So we talked about blood sugar, liver, kidney, vitamin D, thyroid panel. Absolutely should be looking at thyroid panel. We know, the most current estimates are saying about 27 million Americans have thyroid disease and half of them don't even know it. If you are struggling with your metabolic health, your menstrual cycles, fertility, you're losing your hair, we talked about some of these symptoms early on. We want to look at thyroid disease. Primary cause of hypothyroidism in the United States and any developed nation is autoimmunity. By the time we catch autoimmunity in people, because they have symptoms so bad that their doctor's like, I guess maybe we should test this, and we find those antibodies, they can, on average, have 2 or 3 more autoimmune conditions. So if we're doing these panels and we're screening full thyroid panel, TSH, free T4, free T3, TPO, and thyroglobulin antibodies annually, and we see those antibodies ahead of time, again, we can head it off at the pass before you go on to develop maybe more autoimmune conditions. So that's some of the things that your insurance should cover. And of course, like a CBC, a complete blood count, which is going to tell you about white blood cells, red blood cells, risk of anemia. People always are like, oh yeah, but like, how common could anemia be? Very common. Iron deficiency anemia, B12 deficiency anemia, folate deficiency, B6 deficiency. These anemias, very common. Cause fatigue, brain fog. This is where sometimes women in their 40s come to me and they're just like, I feel like I'm just getting older. Like I'm losing my competitive edge. Like I'm not as sharp at work. I can't keep up. I used to multitask all of these things. I'm so fatigued. And we'll find simple nutrient deficiencies from people who are eating pretty good diets. But, sometimes there's something else going on, or there's just a deficiency in the way that they've been eating.
So what's that last test that you said? What is that called?
CBC. It's a complete blood count.
Oh.
It's a very standard test. And usually, if you're paying out of pocket, you can get that test from like $7 to $15. It's not very expensive. It's not going to directly show us like what the nutrients are doing. But for example, if your red blood cell is very small, it's microcytic, and your hemoglobin is down, then that's telling us, so we've got iron deficiency anemia. And I usually like to partner that with a ferritin, which is the storage form of iron. And that one is important because it can tell us if iron deficiency anemia is coming. It's like your savings account. Your blood cells, they're the checking account. They're out there spending it. And when the ferritin gets below 50, some women can experience restless leg syndrome, they can start to have anxiety, and they can start to experience hair loss. So it's a good one to look at. And again, these are all the inexpensive ways to monitor your health. If something comes up in any of that, then we can start to go deeper. We can start to look at all of the other panels out there, things like doing a Dutch test, or, and I like the Dutch test because it also shows, oxidative stress. It tells me about melatonin. There's a lot in there. But for the average person, if they're going to their primary care provider, the tests I just list are going to be the easiest for them to get, and their insurance is going to cover them. They're going to get a lot of data from that.
How about genetic testing?
So genetic testing, what I want people to understand is that genetic testing can have utility. Epigenetics, though, is really the gold mine. So while we might find something, for example, like Angelina Jolie went and got a blood test. It showed she was at higher risk of developing breast cancer because of her genes. That she got bilateral mastectomy, got her breast removed. And, I don't really know her family history and I don't know everything about that. Why I bring that up? Well, one, you're in LA, but two, I had an influx of patients who were like, test me for this and maybe I should get my breast removed. And it's like, well, hold up. There's a lot of things that influence those genes. So we know walking every day, just movement, basic movement, positive influence. For people listening, maybe you're like, I don't resonate with like going to the gym or I'm not really into fitness. I want you to understand that just 2 minutes of doing something that gets you breathless, it's uncomfortable, you can't talk, 2 minutes, a couple times a day, positive impact, huge positive impact on your health. So everybody can start somewhere with that. Eating cruciferous vegetables, bringing in broccoli sprouts, eliminating environmental toxins. Like there are a lot of places to look. And so, yes, genetic testing is helpful. Getting things like, if you know your family history and you're at very high risk of, you've had, aunts with breast cancer, ovarian cancer, maybe your mom had it. We start looking into those things. Cardiovascular disease, people are having heart attacks before they're 50. We start looking into what are your genetics. And the utility in that is that then you understand genetically you are at higher risk and that you really need to be on top of your things and what markers you need to monitor and you need to run. There's a really popular test, MTHFR, that it was really popular. Everybody was doing it. Now it's, I think, a little less popular, but definitely more well known about. With MTHFR, this is how you're processing folate. With these people, folic acid, they don't tend to do too well with it. They can be at higher risk of blood clots. So that might affect their fertility. It could, be putting them at higher risk for a stroke, higher risk of a heart attack. And we just see that with those people, what we want to do is we want to eat folate from the diet, lots of plants, and we want to make sure that we're not taking in folic acid, kind of that, the synthetic version that you find in a lot of supplements. Not everybody's going to do so bad with that, but people with the MTHFR mutation, they may not feel as well with it. And then we want to watch out for how do you detox, what are you bringing in through your environment, environmental toxins, and then how well are you tending to your detox pathways, like supporting liver health by how you eat, drinking enough water and moving so that you poop regularly, those kinds of things. So I hope this helps people understand that even if genetics is inaccessible to you, you're like, I can't test for that. What we do with people when we find these things is a lot of the same nutrition and lifestyle stuff that you can take action on right away. In terms of should you absolutely get certain genetic markers screened, that is what a doctor can really guide you through, advise you on. Taking your family history and knowing you as an individual can help guide that. Because otherwise it's like you're doing a 23andMe and you're getting all of this data. And sometimes, genetic testing can also be scary because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get this. Something that you were never had on your mind, you never thought about, but you were already living in a way that set you up for success.
Do you believe have you heard of like methylated and all this other stuff, like methylated supplements? And do you believe in that?
Yeah, so in my supplement line, we use methylated B vitamins. Those are the activated B vitamins.
Wow, okay.
Yes. I take my supplements and I'm like, I want high quality stuff.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so we do use the activated forms of B vitamins, the most bioavailable, absorbable forms of minerals. Like we make sure that it's the easiest to utilize so that people are getting the most from it. There are people that, they push back, and it's so interesting to me that it's really torn in the OB-GYN community when it comes to pregnancy, because they'll say, no, folic acid. Like you folic acid has all of the research. And I'm like, well, okay, I have a background in nutrition science and I can tell you that like the whole pathway and how things work, like this methylfolate is going to be helpful. Yet their whole claim is that, well, there's no research directly on just methylfolate and neural tube defects. And I'm like, well, that would be unethical at this point for us to do that when the question, is, will we do harm to a developing baby? That's not ethical. We're probably not going to get studies like that. But what I will say is that, so when I was pregnant in my 40s, my maternal fetal medicine specialist, so this is what you get when you're a high risk pregnancy, she was like, take the methylfolate. Don't even mess with the folic acid. Like, I don't even want to have to test you or bother with it. Just take the methylfolate. And that was so interesting to me to see this high-risk specialist saying that, and yet other high-risk specialists will be like, no, take the folic acid. And it's like a hill that they're going to die on with this. Yeah. And I'm just like, and yet you'll have other OB-GYNs being like, we acknowledge that there are people out there that cannot utilize folic acid. They may not know they can't use folic acid, and that does cause harm. I've had patients have 5 miscarriages and switch to a methylfolate and then not have a miscarriage. Now, did I test everything and know and say absolutely definitively without a doubt? But like that's a pretty strong association that's happening there. And if you spend some time on the internet listening to women, there's a lot of women with that story. So that's why I'm like, it's safer that we go with this methylated form when we consider there's about 40% of the population with this MTHFR mutation that might have this issue. And we're going to get pushback. We're going to get, this is highly controversial because, they've been pushing folic acid forever. I will tell you that it takes a very long time. As someone who has been in the health and wellness field for over 20 years, 26 years now, actually, it takes a very, very, very long time for your average doctor to even accept the research that's in front of them. I'm not talking about get the research, accept it. Actually accept it and change their mind about the dogma that they had integrated into their life.
Do you still have a private practice then? Do you still see patients?
I see patients part-time, so it's very limited. Once upon a time, I had 3 practices, and my son came down with an autoimmune condition that affects his brain, and I had to change my entire life. It's called PANDAS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Strep. Any mama who knows it knows it's absolutely terrifying. Your child loses the ability to talk, to sometimes stand still. They have tics. There's all kinds of issues that come up. And there's really no way to know that we know of at this point who's going to get it. You get a strep infection, which what kid doesn't get a strep infection, right? Strep throat, ubiquitous. You get a strep infection, it activates the autoimmunity that attacks the brain. And now we've got OCD tendencies. We stopped sleeping. I mean, he was sleeping like 4 hours a night. And I was like, I can't be running all these practices and seeing this huge patient load that I had on 2 to 4 hours of sleep while I'm completely panicking about my child's health. So it was unfortunate at the moment, but a very fortunate thing because I shifted and did so many things different in my life. And I have to say that I would never want to go back and have that again. And he never had to have it, I would prefer that. And
He's
at the
okay
same
now?
time, I would say he is. And I feel like because of that, we rearranged our entire life, and it is all for the best.
Wow, I'm glad there's a happy ending. That's good.
Yes,
yeah.
I will say I was just really fortunate to have a friend who is an international expert in this condition. And so within 3 days, we were able to identify it. And I'm just really grateful that we went the pharmaceutical route. This is something that, we didn't talk about pharmaceuticals so much in this. I'm a very integrative practitioner. We used pharmaceuticals, but at the same time, I'm like, we've got to heal the gut. If we've got immune system chaos, we have to heal the mitochondria. We have to, there's a lot of things we have to do. And I'm like, if I didn't know what I knew, we wouldn't have been out of it as fast as we were. A lot of parents spend about 6 years with their child being like this before they get an answer and they start to heal.
Wow. Would you, I got to wrap this for both of us, but would you mind coming back and doing another episode? Because there's so many questions I still haven't even gotten to like that. Yeah.
Well, we should do it in person.
I would love it. I thought you're not able to. I thought you're in Puerto Rico.
I am. I will be able to, but as of right now, I have no I think we missed each other because I was in California I did 2 California tours for over 10-day tours last year. And so that's what I think happened, is that we missed each other, and then I came back and I'm like, it was the holidays and everything going on. So I'm
yeah.
like, I have to it's about 19 hours of travel to get to California. So I just have to get it all set up. But what we usually do is we plan in advance, and then I have 3 or 4 podcasts in a day and just hit them all. So yes, but I'm not in California anytime soon, which is why we're here now.
I know, and I hate doing it this way because I just even noticed the internet's been kind of wonky, saying it's struggling. So I'm just hoping that we can, we'll have we can use as much of this as possible. But you're such an amazing, you're like just an amazing wealth of information, honestly, and I love your perspective. I love the information. You're obviously so knowledgeable. I'd love to do a part 2. I didn't even get to most of my questions, but
I love your sheets and sheets.
I have sheets and I took notes. So tell people, the book is called Is This Normal? Dr. Jolene Brighten, so good, so good. I know, follow her on Instagram, buy her book. Where else can people find you?
So Instagram, TikTok, what do we got now? Threads, YouTube. But my main hub is Dr. Brighten, so BRIGHTEN.com. I'm so grateful, and I blush sometimes because women call it the Google of women's medicine. And you will find tons of information there that's completely free on how to support your body, navigate your hormones, and have a better conversation with your doctor so that you can get the testing and the help that you need.
Thank you so much for being a guest. Please don't hang up. I'm gonna end this, but thank you very much. And I want to do a part 2. So just letting you know.
Okay. All right. Let's do it.
Okay, good.